Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar, and today I have Ava with me here. Ava is applying to be part of the Bio-Mystical Womb Apprenticeship program and wanted to come on and share her interest, her questions, her enthusiasm, her concerns about starting up with this program right now. And I thought it would be lovely to put this on the podcast so others of you who might have similar questions or might have similar interest in the Bio-Mystical Womb Apprenticeship program can hear my answers and share Ava's enthusiasm and like that. So Ava, please introduce yourself, share a little bit about why you're interested in this program and any questions that you might like to start out with.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here. My name is Ava and I am 21. I recently am a graduate of Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and I studied religion and sociology during my time. And I guess I am interested in the Bio-Mystical Womb Apprenticeship program because as I've grown emerging in this world with a womb and as a human with a center, I've realized that really the only way to keep moving forward in a balanced and healthy way is to understand what's going on inside of me and to be connected to that place in me. And I guess I've kind of, how I've processed it has been that there's sort of like there's one way to go. It's either or there's two ways to go. It's either to look outside of myself and to keep pushing, or to slow down and look on what's happening inside of me and how I'm reacting to the world around me and what I'm creating for myself and other people. So I would love to be in the program because it really inspires me that there are people that are going through the same exact process, and that you, Sama, have lived it and experienced it and created systems for yourself that are internally focused and affirming of that process. And I would love to be a part of that process with other people who also want that for themselves and need that for themselves and need to hold on to that for dear life and want to create systems for others to walk the path instead of feeling hollow for their lives.
Beautiful, some potent reflections and motivations I hear you sharing about this need to be connected to what's inside of you and to fill yourself up with meaningful experience and connectivity, and the realization, the awareness that what's available in the world, say at university or at a job or different things that are available in mainstream society, aren't filling you up in those ways, or have the potential to not support you being connected with your inner self. And I just want to acknowledge your wisdom of recognizing that and saying, I want to explore a different way and find systems and develop systems for myself and learn from people who found a different way, and surround myself with people who are who are learning and developing and growing and living in that different way. So that's really beautiful. I just want to honor and acknowledge your intrinsic wisdom in just even asking those questions to begin with. So beautiful. Yeah. So do you have any questions or curiosities, worries or concerns about the program that you want to talk about?
I'm wondering if you could start off by kind of explaining what the Bio-Mystical Womb Apprenticeship program is and some of the details or processes that happen within the program.
Well, if you want, I could share the apprenticeship access page and give you a little bit of a behind the scenes look in on what's available in the apprenticeship program. Do you want to take a look at that? Oh, she wants to see. Okay, just hold on one second. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share the screen here. So once you sign up for the membership, the site membership on my site for the apprenticeship, you'll be able to come onto this apprenticeship access page. You can see up here in the browser bar that's the apprenticeship access page at samamorningstar.com. Only members who've signed up can access this page. So you're in the process of doing that. So you'll have access here soon. I'm just going to move our video photo on my screen so that you can see the different parts of this page. So there's over here in the anchor menu over to the right, not that menu that just popped down, but over here to the right, this right side oriented headings with these white dots along the side help you navigate through the apprenticeship page. There's an intro podcast in which I talk about some of the basic principles of the apprenticeship, which are quite different in some pretty powerful and almost too subtle to even notice ways from other training programs that you might find like this, that spiritual awakening or personal growth training programs. A lot of programs like that, whether it's through yoga, whether it's through Buddhism, whether it's through other spiritual lineages that aren't womb-centered, that haven't centered on the womb as this important source of life and connection to the self, they're very much built on a foundation of patriarchal suppression of our womb powers. Even though some traditions like Tantra traditions and some Buddhist traditions still have a remnant of ancient pre-patriarchal womb-centered spirituality and womb-centered awareness and living, there might be some remnants of that, but for the most part, these more mainstream traditions are utilizing energetics that are moving us away from embodiment. So Kundalini Yoga, for example, is all about ascension and moving the energy up through the chakras and out the crown of the head and getting away as quickly as possible from the cycles of life and death by ascending to some enlightened place somewhere else. Okay, so that is and can be a powerful approach to healing and transformation, but it's a very masculine energy flow, which is a wonderful energy flow, but can become detrimental and very imbalanced if that's the only energy flow that we're paying attention to and prioritizing. And the feminine, a more feminine energy flow is one of embodiment, of inviting spirit in and becoming embodied spirits, fully embodied, and fully embodying the rhythms of life. And that's where the womb becomes central, because the rhythms of the womb, the rhythms of our life cycle and menstruation and birthing and, you know, the end of menstruation through menopause and becoming older into our wisdom years and death, that whole rhythm has intrinsic wisdom and spiritual awakening processes built in. So that if we fully embody those instead of trying to get away from them, we can have the experience that all that getting away from it is trying to have. And in fact, I feel that a lot of these processes that are about ascension, up and out, are trauma responses, and very similar to what happens when people are traumatized and they dissociate from the body. And so any spiritual practice that, you know, some of them are blatant, claiming that the body is sinful or bad, especially the feminine body, the female body, then that's obvious that those traditions are very much, you know, not really wanting to connect with the womb, even though they may have original connections or seeds of wisdom that connect with the womb. So anyway, I could go on and on about this topic, but so that's just one difference. There are many differences. So like many programs that are like that are about sort of tearing apart the ego and dismantling the structures in our lives that make us who we are. And this can be very re-traumatizing. If you know, people are already traumatized, and that's why those structures, those ego structures, were built up in our lives, then tearing those apart without healing the underlying unresolved trauma that is the reason for those patterns can just reinduce the same kind of traumatizing experience. And it can be very problematic, that approach to healing. And so instead, what we do is we see whatever ego patterns that we have that might not be healthy for us as like a scab on a wound. And nourish the intrinsic healing powers that we have of awareness, breath and movement, trauma recovery practices, vocal sounding, herbalism, proper nourishment, and going back through our lives and giving ourselves what was missing in the different phases of our lives when we were traumatized, giving ourselves the support that we needed at that time, permission to express our feelings, space and time to process whatever happened. Then as those underlying wounds heal, then those ego patterns, those unhealthy ego patterns, just fall off like a scab that's done its job. And so I talk more about these and other basic principles of the apprenticeship that some are easier than others to implement, because some methods of learning, for example, are very deeply ingrained in people, like this linear learning, through going through a program from the beginning, and you have to finish this first part before you can do the next part. That's so deeply ingrained. And even though I say in the intro podcast, and even though I say numerous times that you don't have to go in the linear order, this is just an organizational tool that I've set up to make sure I get all the material in the program, right, as I'm creating it. Still, people are like, oh, I can't keep up. You know, that's the other thing, is that there's this ingrained idea that you have to do everything that's offered by the teacher. And my approach, and what I keep saying is, no, it's a smorgasbord. I'm the only one. I have to create this. I have to deliver this because it's what's coming through me. But you don't have to eat all of it. You don't have to eat everything on the buffet. You don't have to receive all of it right now. You can keep coming back to the apprenticeship and try a new thing next time, right? But this this deeply ingrained fear of missing out, or, you know, expectation that we have to complete the whole thing, right? Finish your plate, clean off your plate, even if you're full, right? All of those things are so deeply ingrained that I find myself repeating that over and over and over again. So I'm happy to start repeating that for you now. I will say that many, many more times. And then because there's this principle of homeopathic medicine that says the more dilute something is, the more powerful it becomes. And so as we start to learn how to apply that in our lives, instead of having to do a practice every single day for a really long time, what we learn is perhaps we can do a practice once and then watch for weeks as changes start to effortlessly occur in our lives and implement themselves in our day-to-day relationships and experiences. So those are just some pointers that I address in the intro podcast in more depth. That we have an apprenticeship forum. I just clicked on this, and you saw how the page went past the intro podcast, showed the apprenticeship forum, where all the apprentices can come together and share about their experiences. I was doing it on the website, but it doesn't work so well, so I'm changing that. We're going to have that on Facebook, a private Facebook group. And then we have the schedule and materials access. So we started this apprenticeship October 31st of last year, and we had an opening ceremony. Then we went into some pre-birthing material, which is about visiting the ancestral council that through our visionary meditations that convened before we were conceived, and brought us gifts and blessings and information and encouragement, and helped us to understand our soul purpose as we're choosing the parents that we're going to be born through. And so we're meeting our ancestral guides and the ancestors that we're adopting as we're being born through these parents, and the unresolved stuff from their lives that we're going to be taking on as we're born into this parental lineage. And we get all that information then, but then we forget, right? When we're born, we're like, why is this happening to me? So remembering that alone is very healing, okay? So we work with that. We do some preparation for the ancestral council ceremony, and then we do that ceremony in the first couple of weeks. Now, again, remember, I've got this timeline just as an organizational thing. You're entering in at this time in the middle of the timeline, and can jump back and forth. Well, you can't jump forward because I haven't created the materials yet, but you can jump back and forth within the materials that have already been created and completely abandon the timeline if you feel the call to. Yeah. So let's see. The next phase of the apprenticeship is rebirthing. Okay, so then we're revisiting how we were conceived and how we were gestated and how we were born. So as you see, the first week is about reconception.
Wow.
And then the next few weeks, we're doing regestation, cycling through the elements, the air element, the water element, and we're using movement, sound, and breath meditations. So we're combining movement, sound, and breath with visionary meditations. So you have the movement of the body available and the breath and the sound to make sure that you're processing whatever comes up as you're remembering what actually did happen, and then activating the power of that movement and sound to bring healing to whatever did happen. Okay? All right. Just one second.
Okay, so back to the page. Here we go. So we go through the elements. We're doing these kinds of movement meditations. In the program, I often invite in guest instructors. So one of them does ecstatic belly dancing, therapeutic belly dancing. So we have that available to nourish this part of the program. We cycle through with the fire element. Sometimes the other apprentices, some of the apprentices want to share about their process while we're preparing. So I had a podcast interview with one of the apprentices here as we were preparing for the rebirthing ceremony. We worked with the earth element. We did a live call. So there's all of these now are turning into live calls. They weren't at first. I was doing pre-recorded, but then I got feedback saying, hey, we want to come on live with you. So I've been scheduling them as live calls, but I always try to make it one call that's focused on question and answer. So all the other live calls are practices that I'm sharing with you. And if you come on live, there's an opportunity before and afterwards to ask questions or share what you're doing. But this live, the live call that's for that phase is all about you being able to ask questions and me sharing aspects of the program that feel important at that time. And we also, people were saying there was anger coming up around this, which is very common. Anger and grief and other emotions start coming up as we revisit these times where we weren't getting our needs met one way or another, or perhaps we were feeling our parents' unresolved anger and trauma and things like that, and that can be deeply buried within us. And as we revisit those times with these practices, those emotions that didn't have space or support to be processed can come up. And then especially when we have this container where we're activating our womb space to hold this for us, and we're activating these practices of movement, sound, and breath, and artwork too. People have been creating all kinds of artwork to express and allow space for these things. And then we prepare for a rebirthing ceremony where we reenact the process of our birth, bringing our awareness. We work a lot with goddess archetypes. So bringing the mother goddess that has all the qualities that perhaps we felt were missing in our birth experience. We bring that mother goddess into our birth experience, and we bring our older, wiser self to that birth experience and give our infant self and our mother whatever was missing in that birthing experience. Very powerful, very transformative. Then we move into the remothering phase, where we're revisiting our infancy and early childhood and applying these same skills and practices to that time. So we have an opening ceremony, and then we're doing meditations around breastfeeding. We're using herbal preparations all along the way too. So here I show how to make flower essences. Flower essences are really excellent. The flowers give us emotional wisdom. And this is something often that we're supposed to be learning from our parents when we're very young, even in the womb. But because our parents haven't resolved all kinds of emotional wounding from their past and from generations back, their emotional wisdom isn't there to model for us. And instead, what we're learning from them are unhealthy emotional patterns, right? And so the flower essences help us to have a model for healthy emotional patterns and start to absorb that for ourselves from a source that has a healthy emotional essences to offer us in the flowers. Those flowers have that. So we also focus on the breasts a lot at this time because many of us weren't breastfed adequately. And so we activate our own breast power to nourish ourselves. And so, yeah, so we do that. We go through the elements again through these meditations of remothering, and just let um, whatever parts of our childhood that need healing come to the surface. We also do womb yoga. So every week there's a womb yoga practice where we're getting more into different places in the body in more specific detail, and into more somatic dance, movement, breath, sound practices that address whatever we need at that time. And then, of course, we get into the belly for belly massage. A lot of our emotional tension, a lot of our emotional patterns that we're struggling with show up as tension in the belly, tension in the womb. So we learn about how to massage the belly and really release some of that tension. I did a flower essence reading circle, more womb yoga. We did a tree breathing meditation where we're connecting to that wisdom of the trees. And then we did a remothering full moon ceremony, because the full moon is all about the mother phase of our cycles, the fullness of mothering. So we're really nourishing our own ability to mother ourselves, and to fill in the blanks of whatever might have been missing in our upbringing.
Mm.
And then we have some integration time between these phases. The womb yoga continues even when we're having integration time, because people who aren't in the apprenticeship are signed up just for the yoga. So every week there's yoga, and we also did a integration activity of a placenta burial ceremony. So many of us, our placentas got, flushed out somewhere through the medical waste facilities. And there are many traditions in the world where burying a child's placenta into Mother Earth is considered important to connect the child now to Mother Earth as their mother, and that especially before menarche and coming of age, when there's an activation of that connection with Mother Earth, where the young woman can then start, or young man, whomever it is, coming of age of any gender, if their placenta was buried in Mother Earth, can start receiving wisdom, emotional guidance, spiritual guidance, nourishment directly from Mother Earth in that time of coming of age, when they're not receiving it directly from their biological mother, their birth mother, so much anymore. So then this next phase, we're going into working with that coming of age, and we start doing dance meditations and steaming. So we're steaming and dancing over the herbal steam. So the steam helps to bring more circulation to these areas of our body in the pelvis that have gone into atrophy because we haven't been paying attention to the core of our being. So, and especially to the womb. And there's so much that has gone on for many of us where we weren't properly initiated into menstruation and into our sexuality. In fact, those times got completely suppressed, swept under the rug, shamed, abused in so many ways. And that's traumatizing. And so that trauma gets stuck in the tissues of our pelvic floor, of the womb and the vaginal canal. All of that physicality gets stunted in its aliveness. And so the steaming with the herbs brings more aliveness. And I've been getting wonderful feedback about the combination of the steaming and the movement and the sound, and how it softens the armoring that we create around those traumatized places in our bodies, and allows whatever's in there to come up and come out and be processed and released. So the steaming as part of that is really powerful. And we're working with our inner maiden, which is often I'm still working with my inner maiden, and I'm turning 50. My inner maiden has a lot to say and never had the space to really say it. and has a lot of needs that never got met.
What does that
And
mean?
so, pardon me?
What does that mean, inner maiden?
So there's the triple goddess archetype, the maiden, mother, and crone. And some say quadruple goddess because there's the enchantress between the mother and the crone, or the wild woman. There's many different archetypes, but I'm working with the simplicity of the triple goddess. The maiden is an archetype for that time after we start menstruating and before we start really mothering. And there's a really wonderful period of self-awareness and development of our purpose in life that gets completely neglected oftentimes. And that feminine autonomy and sovereignty and development of sexual maturity, and development of awareness about how we want to relate with a possible mate, and development of awareness of what our purpose might be. Do we want to birth children, or do we want to birth books and artwork or some other thing? So discovering what our soul purpose is as an adult is an important maiden part, and it's been terribly neglected for a long time. The maiden is a very powerful time for women and for people of all genders. There's that time of self-discovery that unfortunately has been edged out of our experience growing up. And well, I could go on about why that goes on, but I'm sure if you're drawn here, you can kind of relate to what I'm saying. And so that neglected, underserved maiden inside of us is an archetype that we can connect with. And so we're doing visionary meditations of imagining what our inner maiden feels like, looks like, and asking for her guidance about what we need to do to bring things back into balance. And so we see how our inner maiden relates to our inner mother, because we're working with that inner mother, learning how to mother ourselves, but also our biological mother and whatever archetype she represents inside of us, and then the divine mother. And so we're just working with these archetypes in our visionary meditation and seeing what comes up for us to address. And we're not going to do all of it in 13 months. This is a lifelong journey. And so these 13 months are just this month of, revisiting our coming of age is just the beginning of what can happen then. As once you become aware of these archetypes, then you can be having conversations with your inner maiden for the rest of your life and learning how to implement your real dreams and your soul purpose. So there we go. And if you're in your maiden phase right now, you can learn how to be in your maiden phase by giving voice to that, giving priority to that, to those needs that so much of society says aren't important. Okay. So we work with herbal preparations for this phase, do the yoga, and then we work with the maiden and the crone, which is the older woman. And the maiden and the crone, the maiden's going through, coming up to menstruation and learning how to be a menstruating woman is very similar to the mirroring transition, the mirrored transition of going from the mother phase into menopause and the crone phase. Menopause is just as much of a coming of age as that menarche is. And so it's a powerful transition, and the crone has a lot of wisdom for us. So we invite our future self to bring her wisdom, and we invite the archetype of the crone and the divine mother forms of the crone to guide us in our transition. And it's like going to grandma's house and have some cookies and milk, right? So who wants to miss out on that? All right, so we also consult with the Ancestral Council again to prepare for the menarche ceremony. And then we get the maiden, the mother, and the crone, all three together for a dance meditation. We have a dance meditation with the maiden and the divine father. Okay. Uh-oh. Sorry, I scrolled in the wrong direction. And we have a dance meditation with the maiden and the trickster. So the trickster is an archetype of masculinity that is often very appealing to maidens as we're exploring our freedom to choose and be sexually active and like this. And there's a healthy relationship with the trickster in every man. And then there's some male archetypes, or in every person actually. We all have the trickster within us, right? And so in any partner, there's the potential, any sexual partner or romantic partner, there's the potential for that trickster to be involved in some way. And so we're exploring, because sometimes that trickster can be very detrimental and narcissistic in the relationships, and it can be a big place where we get stuck in trauma loops and abuse loops in our relationships. And so exploring that and starting to learn how to be in our own power then starts a different relationship with that trickster energy, where then it becomes fun and exciting instead of dangerous and detrimental.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the intention behind having this maiden and trickster dance, where you get to just see what comes up for you in that, around that energy and that archetype.
I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah. So if you're in your maiden phase, if you're 21, you may still, and you're really in your maiden phase, so you'll understand the draw of that trickster energy and want to explore how to navigate that and recognize the lies of the trickster and then the beneficial energies of the trickster. And that's really important.
Wow.
Okay, so then we have integration time again, and then we move into, now the phase we're in is creative fertility. So this is all about how our menstrual cycle and our sexuality can become this great source of creativity in our lives. Now, whether that's creating a baby, or whether that's creating a livelihood, creating a career, creating artwork, a body of work of some sort, creating your own contribution, your soul purpose contribution to the world, creating a community, perhaps. There's all kinds of things that you might feel you want to create. And so in this phase, we're nourishing and healing any restrictions or tensions or wounding around that flow of creativity, and nurturing it through different practices like writing from the womb. So finding our womb voice and learning to express that womb voice that's been so suppressed and not given space to. Okay. We'll also be doing womb dance. We'll be doing womb song. And we've also started a herbal womb wellness course in which we're looking at the menstrual cycle in detail and what it has to tell us about imbalances in our overall health. And as we address those imbalances with herbs and steaming and other herbal treatments, we can start to feel how our creative fertility has more flow, more vitality, and more clarity to it. Okay. So as we progress, we're going to be doing womb dance, womb song, womb art, and then a closing ceremony. Then the next phase will be creative partnership, where we'll start to look in more detail at our relationships with potential partners whether that's friendship partners, whether that's work partners, whether that's romantic partners, it's all the same. So we're going to be exploring various aspects of that through these meditations and practices in similar ways. So it's very somatic, but also reflective, and we'll use some of these creative fertility practices to explore that. So we'll be using the womb song, the womb dance, the womb art, the writing from the womb in more depth to explore creative partnership and what it means to be in partnership instead of domination and submission, which is what relationships tend to be about in our domination-based society. So then we get into the enchantress phase. So this is the phase where we're really exploring our soul purpose and how we can create whatever it is that we're meant to create in the world and deliver it to the world and enchant the world with our gifts. Okay? And then the last phase of this apprenticeship is the wise one phase, where we're going to connect with our inner wise one. Perhaps we're already in that post-menopausal time, and we'll do some retroactive initiation around that for those participants who have gone through menopause already. For those of us who haven't, we'll look at how we can prepare for that transition. I've been preparing for menopause for over 10 years now, because one of my first teachers about women's mysteries taught me about how important menopause is and how important it is to prepare for menopause and to really be living our lives in a way that we're addressing what our menstrual cycle is asking for now, so that it doesn't just pile up to menopause, which is then when things go really haywire for women in their menstrual cycle and their life and all of that. If we're completely not really aligned with our core our entire life, then menopause can be horrendous. Because that wise one inside of us is like, you didn't prepare for what my work is supposed to be. And it's a big, challenge to get there, right? And some people just ignore that whole thing and have all kinds of terrible physical symptoms, and that's it. So, but for me, it felt important to stay connected with myself and the inner guidance I was receiving, and develop myself to be ready for that wise one transition.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll be working with that. So also on the access page, there's the access information for the live circle calls. Like I say, the question and answer calls. There's a womb listening meditation that I encourage all apprentices to refer to if they're like, wow, there's so many different things to do. Do I go through it in a linear way, or how do I know what I'm supposed to do today? And I encourage apprentices to listen to the womb listening meditation, or do their own version of it. After you've listened to it for a while, you start to get your own version of it, and choose what part of the practices, what part of the program to engage with. It doesn't have to go in that linear order. I'll say that again. It doesn't have to go in the linear order that it's outlined in on the page. That's just a structure for my own thoroughness of being able to deliver all the different parts. But since, especially since you're coming in here sort of in the middle, you can say, okay, am I going to do the ancestral council first, or maybe I'm going to do the remothering first, or what's like jumping out at me off of the page and saying this, and that's what you get to do. Okay. And then there's a herbal womb wellness assessment questionnaire, which is different. There's a couple of different ones. This one you can do on your own, where you just go back through your life and start to look at some of the sources of where things might be causing unwellness in your womb. Looking at the same timeline here and starting to have reflections on the different phases of your life when those important initiations weren't attended to. So questions about your birth, questions about your childhood, questions about your menarche, questions about your sexuality as it developed, all of that. So that assessment questionnaire is a really good reflection tool to start to look at it all. And then I have information about scheduling one-to-one sessions with me, because there's several one-to-one sessions that are included in the apprenticeship program. And then there's guest instructors. So there's access to the guest instructor page where there's guest instructors that are teaching about jade egg practices, therapeutic belly dance, emotional freedom technique, sacred site transmissions, lunar psyche practices, and more. So you can always find that here. So there you go. That answers your first question, and probably a few more that you might have had along the way.
Thank you so much, Sama, for taking the time to go through that whole program.
You're welcome.
One question that came about was, what does menarche mean?
So menarche is your first menstruation.
Oh.
Yeah.
For some reason, I was associating it with like men and monarchy. That is not what it is.
No, it's your first menstruation. So it's interesting to note that the word men is the same root as the word menses, which means monthly cycles. Moon and month and menses and men all come from the same root words.
Oh, that's cool.
So the word for men is actually very much coming out of this very feminine thing. The moon, the menses. And so originally we can find these connections to pre-patriarchal ways of understanding the world, even in the very roots of our language.
Whoa. Because how could you build anything without a cycle or some sort of rhythm that is just there?
Exactly.
Oh.
And everyone's born out of the power of menstruation to create a nest for new life.
A question that I had while you were talking about the reborn, I think it was like a meditation or ancestor calling and talking to in the meditation. I guess a fear that I have, and it is a fear, so that shades the question, but like, what if I am not able to allow myself to be reborn, or to, like what if I can't do it?
What if you can't do it? Well, what I feel about that is that it's just a matter of timing. And there are many practices in my training that I haven't been able to do. And I don't know if it's because it's not really for me to do and I'll never do them, or if it's because I'm not ready to do them, or the timing's not quite right. And it's not because it's a failure in me. It's because these healing practices are birthing themselves out of a great, great mystery. And what I endeavor to offer in this program is a place of complete safety and validation for each apprentice to be exactly how they are at any given moment. So and this has happened with some of the other apprentices, of like, wow, I just can't move on to the next phase yet. I keep wanting to do it, but I can't do it. And we talk about it, and it turns out that there's all this stuff happening in their life from the previous practices that they just need to keep going back to those previous meditations. And then there's also like a misunderstanding that they have to have that all done before they could move on to the next phase of the apprenticeship. And the truth is, yes, when we were that age, we had to complete each year of our life before we moved on to the next year of our life. But we're not that age anymore. We've already gone through all those years in our life, and we're traveling back in time. So if we're traveling back in time to when we were 7, we can just as easily travel forward in time to when we were 10. And we don't have to deal with everything that 7-year-old child, every single wound that she unresolved that she has that we're carrying inside of us all at once.
Huh.
And so, for example, if you were, exploring the ancestral council and the reconception, and you did some of the preparatory meditations and visions for the rebirthing, and you got to the preparation for the rebirthing, and you just couldn't pin yourself to a time or a place to do that rebirthing ceremony, you could go through the entire rest of the apprenticeship and do all the other things and not do that rebirthing ceremony yet until maybe the end, or maybe next year. Or maybe you go through the apprenticeship a second time and you don't do the rebirthing till the end of that. So that's what I mean by this linear structure is simply for my organizational purposes. Your healing process is not beholden to the linear structure that I'm using to organize the work that I'm trying to deliver, that I'm being called to deliver, that I'm being like, I have to deliver. Right? But it's exactly the opposite of the intention of this work, for that structure to limit your healing process in any way, and or mandate that your healing process follows that structure in any way. That's the opposite of the intention. So if you jump around in that structure and need to do all this over here and go back and say, well, now can I do the rebirthing? Still no. All right, well, I'm going to go over here and do this stuff that we're doing now, the art, the dancing, the this, the that. Maybe now. Can I do the rebirthing now? Maybe not. Okay, let's see. What else are we doing over here? And that's trauma recovery. That's true trauma recovery. So those processes that we talked about at the beginning, the healing practices that say we're going to tear apart the ego, is re-traumatizing. Trauma recovery processes that really work have this quality of titration, where you visit something that might be difficult, that's buried inside of you, just by touching the very edge of it. And if it welcomes you in, and you can go into it while staying in a relaxed state of rest and digest and rest and renewal, and bring that to that, then great. But as soon as you hit the edge of, oh my God, that's when you need to back up and go to practices that make you feel at ease and in pleasure and in beauty and in comfort, and nourish yourself until you're ready to maybe tiptoe back over there and see, am I full enough with beauty and pleasure and relaxation to hold a difficult place inside of myself? And is it willing to blossom open a little bit more this time? And just allowing however much that blossoming is ready to happen at any given time. And then when it says, nope, can't go any farther, okay. And going back to the things that are easy and beautiful and pleasure filled. Does that answer your question?
Yes, totally. That wow. That is a process that I've like barely scratched the surface of, and like felt that like those glimpses of breath when I feel that give and take that is in balance and I'm listening. But when you talked about that flower just closing up, I imagined myself in so many past moments just going
And a lot of, spiritual teachers and practitioners will criticize and invalidate that happens.
mm,
I've had lovers tell me, "Oh, you're just contracting in fear because you don't want to open up to intimacy." Instead of validating the fact that this is a natural response to unresolved trauma, and being invalidated and criticized for having that response is just re-traumatizing.
yes.
And that response took care of you back at a time when things were really traumatic. And that needs to be validated
Yeah.
and cared for, not criticized and torn down. That's the scab on the wound. And so let's bring healing to that wound. And then the scab just easily falls off when it's ready. Look at that. Your little flower hands, tight in the bud, now just opened up onto your lap or the table. Well, I'm sure you probably have a whole host of other questions, but I think we can save that to another conversation because it's looking like it's time to wrap up for now. Any one last quick little question before we wrap up?
Um,
Or anything you want to share, just in a reflection to share before we wrap up?
um, hmm. I feel like this is a chance to really claim my selfhood and like birthright as a human. And I feel like every human deserves this like wisdom. And thank you so much for sharing this wisdom with the world and creating this space to be validated in this process, in this nonlinear, in this messy, melded, dynamic, interwoven, complicated, sticky, beautiful, icky process.
It's like a pot of soup, right?
Mm.
It's sticky and icky and bubbly and messy until you get just the right ingredients in there, and then it shimmers with aromas that are mouth-watering,
And it fills you on a cold day.
and it fills you on a cold day. That's right. All right. Well, lovely, Ava. I'm looking forward to working with you and listeners. If you're interested in learning more about the Bio-Mystical Womb Apprenticeship and or the Bio-Mystical Womb Oracle Card Deck and book, which, by the way, there's a Kickstarter campaign fundraising to produce this Oracle Card Deck that will, in my hope, offer these kinds of practices to more people, because you can just use that Oracle Card Deck on your own and visit like if you think about the Oracle Card Deck, all the practices and processes in the apprenticeship are going to be in that deck, and you would shuffle it and
Wow.
pull out the one for that day, right?
That's so
So if I could make it so that you could shuffle the activities on the access page in the apprenticeship and just pull one out for that day, we would do it that way to break free of that linear thing. So anyway, if listeners are interested in any of that, I'll share the Kickstarter links in the comments. And just to mention that next year's apprenticeship program, membership in that program is one of the perks that's available in the Kickstarter campaign at a pretty good discount to what the price is actually going to be for the apprenticeship next year. So check that out if you're interested in that. And yeah, that's all for now. I look forward to connecting with you more soon.